Let's get chilly. Hello and welcome back to Let's Chill, the official, unofficial Minnesota Strike, Minnesota Wind Chill podcast. I'm Jeff.
I'm Jay.
And I'm Kane.
And tonight we are joined by the one and only Brandon Mattis of the Minnesota Wind Chill. Brandon, how you doing?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me. Doing pretty good.
Super excited to have you on. We are recapping a big doubleheader weekend for the Minnesota Strike. Quickly preview, they did lose both their games this weekend on the road. Tough schedule, but we have a lot to talk about. Before we do that, Jay is going to kick it off with some stall count trivia. If you can share your screen, Jay. I don't know if you can. Or if you just have questions, you can. Oh, perfect.
Yeah, let's see. All right, there we go. All right, so the first question. This year, which PWell team has the fewest points scored against them? Is it the Philly Surge, New York Gridlock, DC Shadow, or Raleigh Radiance?
I'm going to say DC.
Oh, I was going to say
DC too.
I was going to say New York. I don't know.
It is DC. And Jeff, not only is that wrong, that's the wrongest. Of these four teams, New York has the most points scored against them.
Yeah, Jeff, come on.
Dang.
Yeah, DC is great, and we can get into that like later on, but
all right, second question is who threw the game-winning pass in the Indianapolis versus Chicago game? Was it Travis Carpenter, Seth Goodman, Xavier Payne, or Cameron Brock?
Cameron Brock caught
Xavier
it.
Payne?
It's Travis Carpenter.
Or is
Is
it?
it?
It was Travis Carpenter, yeah.
Okay.
And then finally, in which game did the Wind Chill have their highest completion percentage to this point in the season? Was it the first game against Pittsburgh, the game against Chicago, the second game against Pittsburgh, or the game against Madison?
Not the second game against Pittsburgh, I'll tell you that.
First game against Pittsburgh.
I think it might be the Madison game.
I'll go Pittsburgh game 1.
It was actually the game versus Chicago.
Wow, we were all
The
wrong.
first Pittsburgh game, I believe, had a 93% completion rate, and the game against Madison, I think, had a 94, and the game against Chicago was 95.
Wow.
Interesting.
Very nice. Well, before we get to the Wind Chill, we are going to talk about the Strike. Like I said in the intro, the Strike had two big games, two tough road games. They started in Philadelphia against the Surge, and then they traveled to New York to play the Gridlock. The Surge game, they lost 21-15, and versus the Gridlocks, they lost 24-15. So they actually were held to 15 points each game. Initial thoughts on the weekend. What do we think about these two losses? It does officially knock them out of playoffs. We were talking about how they might have technically been knocked out of playoff contention before, but yeah, what do you guys think about the games?
I think overall, they were disappointing losses that I feel like didn't need to happen, but also I don't feel like they were like we threw the games away. I think they were both really well put together games that were just kind of, I don't know, it's kind of an unfortunate looking back on it. Like, dang, I wish those would have went a little differently, basically. But
in that first game against Philly, the announcer said something along the lines of the Strike were playing with a sense of urgency in the third and fourth quarters that if they would have been playing with in the first two quarters, that they probably would have been a much tighter game, a much closer game, and possibly even a Strike win. And I think that kind of summarizes how I felt about that Philly game as well.
Yeah, I think in the game against New York, it almost was maybe not the opposite, not that they were playing with urgency at the beginning, but I think they were tired. I think their fatigue showed in their game against New York. I think in the first half of the game, they were holding pretty well against New York, and the first half of the game, there were no breaks from either team. So again, it kind of showed, I think, the Strike's strength in that regard, that the same way they played against the Radiants. they do a great job at holding their opponents and stopping them, slowing them down while also maintaining their own strength. But then I think the second half of that game hit, and it was just like a whole weekend of Ultimate on the road, and I think it just piled on, and that's tough to do. And I think the game just kind of got away from them after that.
Yeah, the travel schedule, I mean, in general, is like brutal when you play a doubleheader. I've been a part of many in my career, and the second day is just, yeah, you feel heavy and fatigued, like even if you prepare properly. Yeah, and I mean, the games are a little bit longer than USAU games, and so like it definitely does seem to set in a little bit. I didn't get to watch the Philly game much, but the New York game, I think that was definitely true. You could see that they're getting broken on the mark a lot, and yeah, just yeah, the defensive pressure starts to kind of wane as the game goes along. Yeah, tough. I feel like New York's maybe not quite as deep of a team as Philly either. Like I've been really impressed with the Philly women's ultimate community in general.
Mhm.
I feel like maybe if those games are reversed, then Strike pulls out at least one of those wins. I think that the depth that New York kind of showed a couple times when people would squeak deep and Strike would like have a wide open person downfield. Yeah, I think if they get that game first, we might be having a different conversation here.
It's an interesting point. Do you think like, and this is like super hard to compare, like it's kind of apples to oranges here, but we kind of talked in our game previewing these two matchups, like a lot of Ultimate players have experience with, weekend tournaments and how that's very grueling. Do you think that travel aspect like adds a significant like factor to, the fatigue?
I don't know what their like flying sleep schedule stuff was like, so it's a little bit hard for me to say. Like, I
Mhm.
know personally I'm a night owl and I don't like waking up early in the morning, and that can be hard for me. So some of the wind chill games where we've like gotten on a plane at 7 a.m. to go play Chicago, or like we have to wake up and bus to Detroit or whatever, like I
Mhm.
definitely feel the fatigue in those games a little bit more. So yeah, I don't know if, sometimes based on flight schedules and stuff like that, like you just don't get to sleep as much, or you have to wake up early and it's out of your routine. And the home team gets the benefit of sleeping in their own bed and sleeping up, like sleeping in, and being able to make food at home and like that kind of stuff. And yeah, I don't know if we give that enough credit. um yeah, you can just pay a little bit more attention to your preparation when you have all the stuff available to you at home.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's just not as you're just not as comfortable on the road for
Right.
sure. I think something too that I noticed, at least in the New York game. I also didn't watch the full Philly game, but um, I think the Strikes defense did a great job at, like I said, kind of pressuring, especially the cutters of New York. But I think one thing, again, we are talking about how they're only holds the first half. In the second half, like they just couldn't quite punch in those breaks, or even in the first half too, I suppose. Like, yeah, I guess when I saw that, I was like, that might be the game. And I think that was kind of the game against the Radiants too, where that game was only a 2 point loss. But that kind of ended up being the outcome of the game, was not being able to secure the break after the block.
I think I said it before, but the ability to control a point on defense, both when you're playing the defensive point and then when it switches over, and to be able to close that out is something that the Strike, I feel like, maybe haven't done super well this whole season, like you said about the Surge game, or not the Radiance game. And I think like these two games, it really caught up to them, and we kind of saw, well, not only just like the tiredness of the whole season, but like the weekend too, where they just couldn't close out on those points. It felt like even if they were able to set themselves up, it just felt like they weren't able to quite take that last step or take that last throw, and it just like a little bit was missing. It felt like.
I feel like in both of the
Honest,
pro games, the break conversion percentage is really everything. Like if you can break on defense, even if you don't break, right? Even if you get a long point where you're possessing the disc for a while, that like just forces the O line of the other team to work really hard defensively and wears them down over the course of a game. Like that makes such a big difference. And then if you do break, obviously, either one, they're running the same O line back, or two, they put like a rebound line out, and there's a chance to kind of like double down on that break opportunity. So yeah,
Right.
converting on breaks is everything, and it definitely was a struggle for Strike for sure in the New York game.
Yeah, I mean,
I
like they
want to
definitely.
say
Oh, go ahead, Jay.
part of that, I feel like, at least maybe not so much in the New York game, but just throughout the rest of the season, especially in the game against Philly and again in the game against Surge, was that Philly and Surge were just also working really hard to get those holds, to get the disc back from the Strike in those games. And it just felt like Strike couldn't figure out, or not necessarily couldn't figure out, but like couldn't get their way through the offensive line when the offense was playing defense. Like they couldn't get the disc down the field. It wasn't necessarily that the Strike weren't like finding those opportunities, but that the opposing teams weren't giving them the opportunities in those regards.
I think a positive side of that though too is that kind of like Matt has said, like I think the Strike did a great job at extending points, whether or not they would eventually punch it in. Like we've said this all last season and up this season too. Like I think their handlers are do a great job at resetting. Their cutters do a great job at cutting down, cutting in, getting that reset and finding space. Rather than just like, oh crap, my stall count's getting high, I gotta huck it. Like they find ways to extend the point, tire out the opposing team. Um, and again, like sometimes it doesn't swing their way, sometimes they don't get it to the end zone, but I definitely noticed that and how that was true in the last three games, Radiance, Surge, and Gridlock. So I want to give them credit there too.
Yeah,
Cool.
they definitely. I don't want to say they threw away any defensive opportunities, but at the same time, you do still have to convert to some extent. I mean, no breaks at all is not a good number, but yeah, I feel like the offense did a really good job of, I mean, the whole weekend or the whole season has done a really good job of carrying the line when, the team is getting down a few points. It feels like the offense is always out there giving the hustle back. So I know we've been talking a lot about the defense tonight, but I want to make sure we don't neglect all the effort of the offensive team.
Yeah, their O line is scary, and their D line is too, but their O line is like not fair.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I was going to mention that too. Like they were missing Max right this weekend and no Jane. I feel like that, like you put Max out there and you have the ability to also move like a Poyer Peasley over to defense a little bit more. And that also helps with the break conversion percentage just because their offensive prowess. So
Mhm.
that, yeah, not that two players make a game by any means, but that definitely makes a difference when you're juggling personnel and trying to do stuff creative, right?
Yeah,
Especially on
that's
a,
a great
a
point.
double header weekend. I mean, having a full strength roster and like you said, being able to switch the players between the lines. I mean, maybe that makes a difference having just an extra couple pieces here and there to get those break conversions, but
Yeah.
no way to know.
All right, I've got a couple. So I have technically one clip to share, but it's two back-to-back plays or back-to-back points, I should say. So it just shows, I think this is the game against New York. Jeez. And it just shows how the first point it has the Strike punching in a great goal. Again, it shows their patience. And then the second point right after that is going to talk up or show how despite their great defensive effort, it just didn't go their way. So it's a slow down, but just like, oh, this wasn't the whole point. But it prior to this, there was some good handler movement, like we've talked about. That huge layout after, like the look wasn't maybe great. Like the announcers were kind of questioning the look, but it paid off. And it went their way. This is against the Surge, not the Gridlock, like I said. Um, and then Jay brought up this next point. If I can skip ahead a little bit, how it just went the complete opposite way for the strike. Um, I don't want to skip too far ahead, but we're going to see great cutter pressure from Amelia Zdeklik, and she's going to jump up and like should get the block, but the disc just kind of stumbles into the receiver's hands. So again, like even that, like the handler was kind of hesitating. I think the strike were set up pretty well, um, kind of doing their thing on defense. But then she gets off that look and watches the deck lick. Like, uh, Jay, you found this clip. What did you want to talk about with this clip?
Yeah, so I mean that was like crazy hustle from Zdeklik. I mean, watching that play, I was like, yes, that's an insane block, you know. And then just to see the surge come down with that catch, I feel like at this point in the game, a 6-point lead feels, I mean, not completely insurmountable, but pretty insurmountable. Um, so like getting that block would have been a huge change of momentum, possibly able to lead to a comeback. Uh, and like I was saying, like the strike weren't playing bad. The strike were playing fantastic. Even that block is a great play. It's a great defensive effort. Philly was just, I don't want to say like better or luckier, but like that, look at that catch. She just saw the disc coming down, reached out and grabbed it. Like Philly just gave up no opportunities in this game. And it felt sort of similar in the game against New York. Um, Again, more in the second half of that game, but especially in this game, just every play that could go Philly's way kind of felt like it was. And, the strike were just not, it was not, luck was not on their side.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you guys see Amelia's face? Oh my gosh.
Yes.
She was like
We've all been there. As a
devastated,
defender,
so
we have
happy.
all been there. We have all
Yeah.
been there.
Well, and that play is a good example of it, where like Amelia the Declan did not have positioning. Like that was just a really, like you said, a really good play. Hard defensive play to make over the defender, and then just so happens that it's another second effort from, I didn't catch who that player was, but the search player, and it feels like, to your point, Jay, where you can't really game plan against that. You can't really like, right, how do you convert off of that point? And then once they kind of do start building that momentum, it is hard to get back into it. So I don't know. It's just like it's disappointing. It's like a
Tough. Well, and then again, even the play before, like that huge layout, I think that throw was just a little lead, through the space, and they were able to lay out and like pick up that throw. It did go their way, so it was like that's the game. And yeah, it's tough to plan against that. It's tough to swing it the other way, but I mean, it's a good strike team still. It's a different strike team than last season, and like, we can't compare to a 6-0 season. Like you're never, I mean, not that you're never gonna have it again, but like to repeat that and build off of that is hard. And they've done a great job too, especially their coaching staff, like getting totally new coaches in there, losing a couple pieces, gaining a couple pieces. Like it's been a fun season to watch the strike and like how they've kind of not rebounded from, but built on last season.
Yeah, that's a lot going on. You go 6-0, then go to championship weekend. You have a full coaching staff change. Your strength of schedule is way harder. Like just was this year, right? Especially with the back-to-back against New York and Philly. Like that's brutal scheduling. So yeah, kudos to them. Like I don't think the record shows how good of a team they are. And it'll only get better with some pieces falling into place with the coaching staff having more experience and stuff like that too. Plus they're really young.
right.
That's the thing, yeah. I feel like they were able to get a few good like key vets like Julia Hill. And they still have like Byers and Mexdrop, but right, like there's a great future ahead for this team. I think one person who's kind of been on my radar thanks to Noah Hansen, because in our preseason interviews with the Wind Chill, Noah Hansen shouted out Tori Gray. So Tori Gray's kind of been on my radar this season. And they have like lived up to the hype, I guess, of Noah Hansen. But yeah, I think they're a fun player to watch, and it's just
So
gonna be
bad. So bad. It's insane.
I'm wondering. I'm curious about their future because I think they're talking about going to grad school after this. So we'll
Yeah, I
see.
heard UCSD or something on the broadcast, maybe. So
Yeah. So
going out west, that's a bummer. Short tenure here, but
right. Good future ahead. But okay. Well, moving on to some league news. We're gonna start with the PUL league news. Unless anyone has anything else about the strike games this weekend. All right. So league news. So speaking of championship weekend for the PUL, New York and Philly are the North Division representatives at championship weekend. Um, Kind of fun that the Surge are hosting championship weekend and they get to make it. Uh, as we know how exciting that is to represent your own, in front of your own crowd. Um, so shout out to them. That's awesome. DC Shadow has also clinched for the South Division, and the final spot is going to be determined next weekend between Raleigh Radiance and Austin Torch. I I think it's probably going to be a Radiance. Kind of seeing them play. I guess I haven't watched the Torch play, but I've seen the Radiance play, and um, but that'll be kind of a fun little piece to watch there. For the UFA, there's some news coming out today about the new commissioner, Tim DeBile from the Madison Radicals, has stepped up to be the new commissioner of the UFA. He's been he's held like senior roles with the UFA to this point, just not commissioner, right?
yeah, I mean, Tim's basically been in charge of the marketing for the league, and yeah, I can't remember what else he's done, but he's done some rule change stuff, and yeah, Tim's got his handprints all over the UFA, and so I think a lot of people think that this is kind of a no-brainer move, especially if Steve's looking to do more kind of investment and like funding type stuff. So yeah, kudos to Tim, man. He's put like a ton of work into this league, and it wouldn't be where it is without him. So yeah, say what you want about the Rads, but that man knows how to run a league, that's for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That'd be fun to see. I do occasionally see him come across Reddit, and he's very active even just in like it's Reddit, but he's kind of working those grassroots efforts. He's active in the community, and it's cool to see. Okay, and then this is my league news to transition to wind chill forecast, but in other league news, the AlleyCats had a doubleheader weekend this weekend. They beat Chicago like we had kind of previewed, which is a buzzer beater win, was super exciting game. And then more excitingly, they lost to the Pittsburgh Thunderbirds. Um, so the Thunderbirds have upset two teams now this season and are throwing chaos into the Central Division. Um, they had like the second cleanest game in league history. They had 5 turnovers. And they were shorthanded. It was exciting to see. It was like a pretty big win too. It was not a tight game by most means.
I mean,
It
yeah, it was
happens to
what,
the best of us.
26-18 was it at the end? Something like that. And
I
what, 5 turnovers? Remember last year when the New York Empire was like the best team in the world to ever play Frisbee, and they had like 32 games undefeated in a row, and they had 4 turnovers, and everyone was like, "This is never gonna happen again. This is the greatest game of Frisbee to ever have been played." And then Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh plays a game with 5 turnovers. What? Where even it's how is Pittsburgh? You know how bad Pittsburgh is? It's in the Central Division. It's not even in the East Division. And they had
Pittsburgh
five
is a
turnovers.
central city.
Basically,
Yeah, unless you're looking at a
Yeah.
map.
yeah, 22 for 22 in the red zone too. That's an insane performance. We have to, because I like to throw shade and be a little spicy. We have to Ewing theory, Max Shepard, right? Like they played better without him.
That's true. That's true. Isn't that
Max
what's
Max is a great player, but like the skill set that he brings, like you're going to get a couple turnovers with him. Like they just aren't going to play the same with him in the lineup. I don't think that a 5-turn game is possible with him playing. Like he provides sparks in other ways, obviously. Yeah, I think the personnel probably had a lot to do with that. But I was saying even game one when we played against them, like they were very competent, especially swinging the disc laterally and reversing the field. What they struggled with was just like punching it into the end zone.
Mhm.
And they integrated some new pieces in their O line with like Hoffenkamp and Oliart and stuff like that. Like I felt like they were going to be a pretty good team in the coming weeks once they gelled. They just needed to figure some stuff out because I mean, if you're reversing the field well and not turning the disc over, that's
Yeah.
95% of the battle, honestly. So yeah, I'm not surprised that they've had some pretty good games lately. I mean, ours was literally an anomaly in like every single way, but yeah, I'm not surprised that they've punched some other teams back.
Yeah. I mean, I think too, it was interesting seeing in the first game against the Thunderbirds, like it just felt like they weren't cutting. It felt like they weren't able to make that forward progress. And yeah, like you said, they figured that out. Like they're working downfield now and they're clicking. And it's really exciting to see the Central Division. Like we currently stand at, Wind Chill at 3-1. The Union are at 4-2 in second place. The Radicals are at 3-2 in third. And the Thunderbirds, AlleyCats, and Mechanics. Like I don't think that is how anyone would have predicted the season to go. Like you could have maybe put the Radicals up there in the top three, but like that'd be a pretty spicy take, you know? Yeah, it's an exciting division. And so we can kind of get into the weekly forecast. Let's preview the Minnesota Wind Chill traveling to Indianapolis to face the Alley Cats. Um, this is the only matchup that we'll see in the regular season against the Wind Chill and Alley Cats. This Thunderbirds win over the Alley Cats helps, but again, they also beat the Wind Chill, so it's not like we're even now, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Uh, Mattis, what do you have to say about traveling to Indy?
I mean, I kind of feel like we won last weekend by not playing.
Yeah, true.
In some ways, right? Like Madison drops a game, then Chicago drops a game, then Indy drops a game. Like Pittsburgh still advances, but we have, we have the head to head against them. Like, yeah, it was. I felt like we won and we didn't even play a game, so that's kind of fun. No, it's always exciting to play Indy. Obviously, they were the second best team in the division last year. Only getting them one time is kind of like a unique schedule wrinkle that we have to face. So in a lot of ways, like I know people are excited about the Colorado and New York games, but this is probably our most important game of the season, right? Like
Oh yeah.
they're the 2 seed. They still are the 2 seed, even with their drop to Pittsburgh. Like we absolutely need to win this game. So yeah, it's a must win for us. And they're running a new offense. We're kind of integrating some college kids back into the lineup. We're playing indoors, which is always kind of a strange wrinkle. Yeah, it's exciting, but it's kind of hard to know what's going to happen, right? I mean, I like our chances. Our offense, I think, which can be inconsistent at times, is going to perform a lot better indoors. But we'll also probably generate less blocks, right, with the no condition. Right. So there's a little bit of give and take there. It's a interesting dynamic, but it's always a fun environment, especially because we're kind of the two heavyweight favorites, for lack of a better term, in the division, right?
Right. Do you think that like the defense for the Wind Chill changes at all indoors when you play the Alley Cats? Like, I want to recognize the factor that the wind plays an outdoor, but also like it's still frisbee and like both teams are still playing the same game. Like, how does the defense like change, or do you not really change?
Yeah, it does. I mean, the biggest one is that like you don't throw as much trap or zone stuff, right? Like we're not going to see as much rollers, like double team rollers on the sidelines, just because getting out of those is a lot easier when there's no conditions. We've done a good job in the past against Indy specifically of kind of like disconnecting their cutter layer from their handler layer and making those really far. if you push those two layers kind of apart, then it's really hard for them to get upfield momentum. And that's a little bit more challenging indoors just because you can throw it farther.
Right.
So those are the two biggest adjustments. I mean, I think you'll probably just see us match up and just try to mono, like our guy's better than your guy, and just see what we can do. Like, I think that's what it's going to look like for the most part.
Yeah. And I think another piece that you talked about was some college players coming back. The roster isn't officially announced, and you can say what you can say, but I think we expect Brandt and PK to be back. I think those are the two biggest names off the top of my head. I know there are a couple. Ian McCoskey should be coming back. And again, I should have gotten permission to ask about it, but Sam Berglund is still a question. It's but yeah, I think there's still some pieces that are hopefully coming back, if not this week, in the near future. Will help like that offense again kind of continue to flow. I think you picked it up really well in Madison. Like looked like the wind chill again, and it was like this is the team who we've come to know and love.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to hear the trivia question that Madison wasn't our best completion percentage, because I felt
Yeah.
like that was our best game so far this season, given like the opponent and how they're kind of playing up and it being in Breeze and the weather and everything. So I felt like that was our best pitched game so far. The bye is a little unfortunate timing wise. I mean, it gives us a chance to rest up and the college kids to get back, but I also feel like we lost some of the momentum that we maybe had from that Madison win. But yeah, Will Brandt should be back. He obviously changes our offense completely. Like it's impossible to mark that man, and so marks just don't exist, and we can throw anywhere on the field, and that's amazing. Obviously, like PK is a spark on both sides of the ball, which is awesome. I think Ian's like dealing with a broken foot, so he might not
Oh,
be.
sure.
He played like all of college nationals on a broken foot or something, like a crazy man.
Oh my gosh.
So he might not be back for a little bit, but
Got
yeah, when he gets integrated, that'll be awesome. Yeah, I don't think we'll have Sam back either. He's dealing with he's got a cast on his throwing hand. So,
Dang.
but if anybody can learn how to throw lefty, it's Sam Berglund. I believe in him. Just a little too early, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
getting back allows us to move Tristan to D, which you guys saw in the Madison game. He's both a really good defender and provides kind of some backfield stability for us. So, yeah, looking forward to it. It's nice having those college guys back after their preseason hiatus.
Yeah, just something.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there's going to be any like players we should be watching for on the defense, because we know like we saw Tristan Vanny Martel on defense against Madison. Is there anything else we should be looking for? Any spicy player combos we're going to have the pleasure of seeing?
Yeah, I don't know. Moving him to D obviously helps us out a lot. I think PK is going to play D, so that'll be fun. Yeah, he's just so good at both. Like you could really put him anywhere, but the spark that he provides on our D line, like if we can get a few breaks, it's going to be huge. So, I don't know. I love the big name matchups like Indy and Madison, because Dylan DeClerc always like complete. I mean, we could talk about him every podcast, so it's a little. He eats up those big matchups, and yeah, I feel like he's gonna pop off for a few blocks. Just he knows that team so well too. It's like a perfect matchup for him to go crazy. Yeah, our lineups won't look that different from what you've seen so far. So nothing too spicy from a combo perspective, but it'll be nice to have the college kids back in full force. Gordon's been playing awesome too.
Yes.
So that's been fun to see as well, but he's playing more O this year.
I think Noah Hansen also like kind of I always maybe I loop them in my mind just because we had them on the pod at the same time, but like I think they are also like both kind of had the same similar trajectory of their career, and like they're both like Noah Hansen also is like able to step up this season, and like he's adding just another element to the game, to the team, which is really fun to see.
Hey, he's really fast and plays heads up, so he gets a couple blocks that you just wouldn't expect people to get, and that's kind of the name of the game in the UFA, right? It's hard to get blocks on the big field, so if you can find a way to generate a couple, like that's going to get you on active 20s, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's always fun when new guys step up and start earning blocks. It's not that he's new; he's been around for a couple of years, but he's had more of an impact this year for sure, which is great.
I know it's only one game, but it does help too to have this game with these college kids before like the summit game, before some of these. And this is a big matchup, not to say this is not. This is, like you said, probably one of the biggest games you'll play this season, but like these super series, Summit, Empire, all these other games, um, get them integrated back into the system, back into the team. Yeah, like get your legs underneath you and ride the high of college nationals and hopefully ride the high of UFA.
Yep. I mean, it's once the season starts, right? Like preseason, we get all those doubleheader weekend practices and training camps and stuff like that. Once the season starts, you get a Tuesday night practice and you get your games. And those are the two ways that you get better as a team. So it's like those guys have been to, one practice now since the Gridlock season ended. And well with Olaf as well. And then we'll have Tuesday practice again this week. We were off completely the bye weekend. Like Ben gave us the weekend off, which is nice. But yeah, it's kind of a learn on the fly. Luckily, we've played with PK and Will and Ian enough. Like it's easy to integrate those guys, and they obviously have UFA experience.
Yeah.
Hopefully learn throughout the year. That's part of the mantra that we've tried to provide, is just like we're going to constantly improve, and some of that happens in the games just because of the nature of how little time we get to spend together, right?
Right. Yeah, I think the AlleyCats game is going to be, like you said it a couple times out, like super exciting to watch. Definitely watch it. I'm watching UFA TV. I'm not traveling out to Indy. I'd love to, but I can't. But we'll also be watching it on your small screens because right in front of us, we're all going to be at Seafoam Stadium watching the Minnesota Strike finish out their season at home. I love that they're able to start and end their season at home. I think that's always exciting. Like, again, win, lose, or tie, like being in front of the fans is like probably the best way to cap your season. So they are playing Indy Red, which will be, I think, a fun matchup again. I wish that we had, well, first of all, I wish that we did this on Tuesday so we had active roster for the win show, but I wish that we had the active roster for the strike too, so we can like round out this discussion better. But again, now that the strike are out of playoff contention, like this game doesn't become meaningless, but like I think the pressure is off now. It's like if we lose, if we win, doesn't really matter. So I think that this game's almost gonna be more fun to watch. I'm sure probably to play. Like I think that this team can use this opportunity to. I don't know if they will try to do new matchups, or if they'll try new lines, or if they're gonna throw out everything. But I don't know. I'm super excited to see the strike finish their season at home, especially after this weekend. Like I think that this will be a good like rinse after that.
Yeah, hopefully it's positive. Like we said, there's still a lot to be proud of and build towards. So hopefully they can finish the season strong. Plus, it's always fun to play at Seafoam. That place is amazing. So they've packed out their stands too. It's been awesome to watch.
Yeah, it's been good vibes for sure. Kane, you got something?
No, I was just gonna say that definitely excited to watch this weekend. Seafoam Stadium, like Matt said, is such a fun place to watch frisbee. So we'll be there. We'll be loud, and we'll also be checking the score of the wind chill game between
For
the
sure.
quarters.
We'll have to rewatch it in full
Yeah,
afterwards.
yeah.
But yeah, it's gonna be a good weekend for Minnesota Ultimate. Absolutely. We will be recapping this upcoming weekend next week, so follow along. Before we sign off, I just want to shout out R1P1 Network, who's been doing some great graphic design work for us with our Zoom backgrounds, all of our YouTube thumbnails, all of that. We really appreciate them. You guys should go check them out. Um, anything else? I think this is good. Mattis, we really appreciate having you on. Like I said, I think you rounded out the discussion. Like, you've played with these strike players before. You obviously play with the wind chill. Like, I think we really appreciated your perspective that you brought tonight.
Yeah, happy to be here. I could talk about my Dragon teammates on strike all day. I think they're some of the biggest ballers on the planet. Love them all to death. So yeah, tune into the indie game. It's going to be a barn burner. Like I said, I think it's our most important game of the season. So if you're going to watch one, that's the one to tune into for sure.
Heck yeah. All right. Well, if that's all we have for you, we will see you at Seafoam and we'll see you next week. Stay chilly and ka-chow.
Good
Ciao.
job. Stay chilly.